So we used the tool VoiceThread, and we used it to address originally just perspective taking. So VoiceThread is an online platform where you can upload videos or you can upload pictures or audio, and it gets students to comment. So either typing a response to an audio or video or providing a narration to the audio or video. And we'd done that, so we were thinking that a student could create a historical character and take on the perspective of that character and use it to analyze the sources through that prism. We ended up changing our concept to include changing continuity because we'd been talking about the Cold War, that was our topic, and the geographical and temporal expanse of the Cold War made it necessary to look at changing continuity as well. So how have perspectives changed and how have they stayed the same? And luckily VoiceThread allows us to do that as well. So the sources you could upload, you could still address through the idea of a historical character, but you could also talk about how that character has changed as a result of successive sources or successive events. We had a few techniques, and it speaks to, we were trying to make student historical thinking visible through perspectives originally, and like I said, we changed that to include changing continuity because we felt it was a more authentic way to look at perspectives in this topic. We had a activity, part of our activity in the early part of the topic was a fake book account that students could create a perspective of a historical figure and how that historical figure related to either capitalism or communism or the ideologies of the time. And it was only later in our activities and later in the topic that we realized that this one perspective may be too narrow a focus for students. And so we looked at this idea of change over time or change over geography in the sense of how do these ideologies really affect different people in different parts of the Cold War and in different places in the Cold War. Yeah, one of the activities we had designed looked at a debate that students could take part in, looking at different perspectives in a debate. And we thought it was a fine task, and we thought students could engage with the different aspects of the debate and use each other to look at the different aspects, look at the different perspectives in this particular issue. But it wasn't until we got feedback from our peers that we realized that it perhaps wasn't as scaffolded or as easily understood as we originally thought. So yeah, challenge then was trying to make the debate more approachable to students and get what we wanted out of them actually out of them. So we reviewed the debate and we set it up so that students didn't have a choice in the perspective they were taking. We assigned certain groups' perspectives and got them working through those perspectives with each other before they came together for the debate. So laying a groundwork of background knowledge and the backgrounds to these perspectives before they could debate in any meaningful way. And I think that challenge was overcome, but we wouldn't really have noticed unless we got that feedback from peers. And like I said, we had these ideas in our head that sound so well thought out until someone else reads it and realizes there's a flaw in that, or there's a hole. I think the strengths of the assessment task were realizing how you really need to embed what you want from students throughout the entire unit. So like, it really makes you think what you're trying to get out of a task and whether you're working towards that over the course of 9 weeks or 4 weeks or a semester. If you're trying to encourage perspectives, for example, through 2 terms, are you really teaching the students how to engage with perspectives over that time? If not, then what do you need to do to change the task to do that? I think the feedback provided from other students was really helpful as well, because we often have this idea in our head of how these things sort of link together, and a lot of it's either unspoken or unwritten. And when you get feedback from someone who doesn't have these things in their head, then you realize there are flaws or there's missing pieces. And from a peer, that's great, but from a student, it probably is it's exacerbated even further. So they don't have the pieces in your minds or your peers' minds that are needed to link those 2 things together. So making things really explicit for students. whether that's increased scaffolding or, I don't know, more tasks in a short amount of time. The feedback we received was really valuable. Like I said, it draws your attention to maybe things that you've overlooked or you've thought are explained and maybe are not so. We received great feedback on all three of the activities, which again spoke to the task point. So if the activities weren't as straightforward as we thought, then maybe the progress towards our final task was not evident. I think providing feedback to other students was valuable in itself as well, because you do get this sensation of thinking your assignment your task is complete, and reviewing other people's tasks, you realize that, oh yeah, that's a great thing to include, or I've missed that out, or I like how they approach the task in this fashion, and that speaks to any of the concepts. I think that was just more about the nature of making sure that students were actually thinking in the way you wanted them to think, rather than a particular concept. So I think the feedback was great to receive and also really useful to give. We did think the concept could change, so we initially thought perspective taking would be quite self-explanatory for students. The idea of looking back in history and picking a character or picking a person, I suppose, a historical figure, students would be familiar with, either from previous years or previous stages. But we really came across that idea of presentism, so whether students are actually engaging in historical perspective taking and empathy, or whether they're looking back with some sort of moral judgment on the task. So yeah, in making sure that we were directing students away from presentism was something we had to really deal with. And I think we got there in the end, but it took a few revisions of our task to make sure that that's what we were going for. Yeah, I took home some really interesting elements of teaching history. I think I previously thought of history really as a process of accumulation of facts, of knowledge, of application of this knowledge. And this idea of historical thinking, historical concepts, really solidified in me and in my teaching that there are these undercurrents that are so necessary for any engagement in history. And without them, that application of knowledge is ultimately meaningless. Like I said, we were working with perspectives, but all the facts and all the background information about a perspective is useless if you're engaging in the process in the wrong fashion. If you're engaging in a presentist fashion, or if you're repeating or retelling a story rather than empathizing with that historical character. So I think it made me realize how important these concepts actually are in the process of teaching history or thinking historically. I think it did. My internship, I was very focused on getting through a certain amount of content, or I suppose making sure I was getting the students into these various avenues of history. And I think looking back at the task, I really had to question where I was going sometimes and reevaluate the trajectory that the class and I was taking. It was unfortunate we didn't get to design our own task in the internship. Ultimately, it would be very valuable if you design your own task to get your class to work towards a task you created, because you understand all the nuances and goals and concepts that are inherent in that task. So working towards someone else's task is more difficult, but still a really important process. If a student is not understanding the concepts throughout the course, then their engagement in the task is going to be challenging. So I think, like, ongoing as a teacher, I think I'll look at the types of tasks that students will have at the end of the assessment, whether I've designed them or not, and really try and encourage the types of tasks that are being undertaken throughout the semester or throughout the term. I think be willing to adapt. I think if I was to provide any advice to students, it would be don't take advice or criticism as a personal slight on your work. It's something that you're trying to work towards with a partner and ultimately with a cohort. And so if you're taking on your project as some sort of individual representation of you as a teacher, then you're going to fall short, I think. So be willing to change and listen to other people in your group, listen to your partner, hopefully have a great relationship with your partner. That is a really useful thing to have. And yeah, keep working on it, keep changing what you have, keep revisiting and evaluating what you're trying to work towards, and whether what you're working towards is worthwhile. Is the students really going to engage in this fashion? And if not, then why not? So I think, yeah, adaptability maybe is what I would recommend.